Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Kiorkof, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about the running back strength of schedule for the 2023 fantasy football season. Now, in an individual week, besides the efforts of our running backs, the offensive line, tight ends, and wide receivers that block for them, there are 11 other men on the opposite side of the field that unify their efforts in order to stop our fantasy running backs from finding success. And therein lies the variable of matchups. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about those matchups for the entirety of the 2023 season in order to identify which running backs have the most advantageous strength of schedules for the season. Because when you have an advantageous matchup, it obviously increases your baseline of production, like we've all experienced playing our running backs against the Detroit Lions and Houston Texans defenses over the last couple seasons. So again, over the course of today's episodes, besides presenting the statistics, I'll talk about which running backs based on their strength of schedule weeks 1 through 17 and individually from weeks 1 through 7, 8 through 14, and 15 through 17, the fantasy playoffs, which running backs we might want to target based on the advantageous matchups on hand. Before we get into today's episode, a reminder, if you guys have not yet already, again, subscribe to the channel. We're making daily fantasy football content for the entirety of the 2023 season with the singular goal of trying to help you guys win a fantasy football championship. Now, besides the strength of schedule videos that we've posted in the last couple days, of course, we have rankings videos, must drafts, a lot of opportunities to go ahead, find content here on the channel that is absolutely going to help you lead in the right direction as you approach your 2023 fantasy football drafts in the coming weeks. Now, besides subscribing to the channel, in order to gain an additional advantage upon your league mates this offseason, I would implore you to go down to the description of the video and click on the link traveling over to Underdog Fantasy. At this current moment in time, the promotion is as such. If you use code Andrew to sign up and make a first-time deposit minimum of $10. Not only are you going to get a first-time deposit match up to $100, you're additionally going to get my 2023 fantasy football draft guide and rankings. This draft guide is hundreds of hours of data that I've collected over the last decade of football in order to lead to my conclusions as to how I want to draft my teams. The rankings by position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, kicker, and defense. Of course, this is for a half PPR, full PPR, 4-point per passing touchdown, 6-point per passing touchdown. On top of it, top 200 flex, which includes running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and quarterbacks. Not only are you going to get those flex rankings, you're also going to get the rankings as a whole updated every single week throughout the month of August. So keep an eye on your spam folder as I will be sending you personal emails with adjusted rankings in order to compensate for any of the injuries and or adjustments that we have seen over the course of this offseason, preseason, going into the 2023 year. Not only that, the rankings don't stop in the preseason. They continue weeks 1 through 18 every single Sunday morning. I will send you rankings by position, by tier, half PPR, full PPR, 4-point per passing touchdown, 6-point per passing touchdown, because the entire point of the channel, like I mentioned, is to help you win a fantasy football championship. So do yourself a favor, check out Underdog Fantasy today. Again, to understand if whether or not you're eligible, the map to the right side of the screen determines that. Of course, eligible states are in yellow in order to potentially draft and, of course, sign up today. So for those of you who are eligible, take advantage of the opportunity on hand. Use code Andrew, make that first-time deposit minimum of $10, and get to drafting via Underdog Fantasy, gain some experience, draft responsibly. Thank you very much. All right, let's get into talking about the running back position specifically for strength of schedule. As you guys can see on screen, I've gone ahead and collected 2022 fantasy points allowed to opposing running backs by defenses. So last season, in terms of rushing statistics allowed to opposing running backs, we have the Houston Texans, who were giving up the most fantasy points per game, which is 21.95. Overall, that's not really a surprise. We always wanted to play our running backs against the Houston Texans regardless. Now, for those of you who are new to the channel and haven't seen this kind of content before, I present this every week from weeks 1 through 18 during my running back videos. I always want to talk about matchups because it absolutely is one of the most important variables to finding success at the running back position. So as you guys can see, these were the 2022 stats allowed. If you were to go ahead and take these numbers, of course, the San Francisco 49ers and Tennessee Titans being the toughest matchups, giving up the fewest points to opposing running backs on the ground last season in terms of total statistics. If we were to plug in these numbers for this upcoming schedule, the 2023 season, we would find that the Tennessee Titans, Detroit Lions, Denver Broncos, Minnesota Vikings, etc. would have the easiest strength of schedule at the running back position, while on the other end of the spectrum, Philadelphia Eagles, Buffalo Bills, Miami Dolphins, they would have the most difficult strength of schedule on a per week average basis. But as we all know, the numbers and the statistics that were produced in 2022 are not going to be immediately replicated because there have been adjustments to these teams. The compositions of these defenses in terms of stopping the run, whether it's player personnel, coaching, has changed. Therefore, we want to go ahead and give you guys an idea as to the run stopping grades of expected starters for the 2023 season. So what I went ahead and did is I collected those grades, found that the Arizona Cardinals are the worst run stopping defense going into the 2023 season, while the San Francisco 49ers, no surprise there, followed by the Miami Dolphins, Minnesota Vikings, Tennessee Titans, are the best run stopping defense based on the run stopping grades of their starters going into the 2023 season. If we were to plug those statistics into the 2023 year, we would find the graphic on the right side of the screen, which is strength of schedule based on run stopping grades. We would find that the Denver Broncos, Minnesota Vikings, Chicago Bears, Detroit Lions would have the easiest strength of schedule. Of course, we're seeing parallels despite the fact that we're talking about the 2022 year and then the expectation of the 2023 year. We still see a couple teams that are, still at the top of this conversation, while there are also still teams at the bottom of this conversation. When we take all of this into account, then we can approach the 2023 season with the potential strength of schedule that we expect at the running back position. But before I get into weeks 1 through 17 and giving you guys the strength of schedule, I do want to remind you the reason why I'm not including receiving statistics is because receiving statistics at the running back position, specifically in regards to matchups and strength of schedule, is not determined by a defense. Receiving statistics are 100% on the willingness of that offense and that quarterback to target running backs on a weekly basis. When I go ahead and isolate the offense last season that targeted their running backs the most out of the backfield, which of course were the Los Angeles Chargers in the receiving game. Austin Eckler, of course, 107 receptions, an incredible year for him. But nonetheless, when I go ahead and isolate their 17-game season, and we look at how many fantasy points these defenses on average allowed to opposing running backs in terms of receiving statistics, and how much statistics, of course, Austin Eckler and the rest of the running backs in his backfield accumulated via receiving yards, on the very bottom of the screen, based on the difficulty of the matchup overall, highlighted by hard, medium, and easy matchups, we found that despite the fact that Austin Eckler had 12 easy matchups last season, yes, he had himself an 11.83 fantasy point per game average against those defenses, but yet he still produced just 0.43 less fantasy points per game against the 3 hard matchups that he faced last season. There isn't that big of a difference in terms of matchups and how many points defense is allowed to opposing running backs. The number one determining factor as to a running back's success in the receiving game is just the willingness for that team to get him targeted and get him more and more opportunity, because opportunity leads to success in fantasy football. And this absolutely applies at the running back position in regards to matchups for the 2023 season. Just wanted to throw that out there. Let's get into talking about weeks 1 through 17's strength of schedule at the running back position. As you guys can see to the right side of the screen, the Minnesota Vikings, Denver Broncos, Detroit Lions, Chicago Bears, Los Angeles Rams have the easiest strength of schedule at the running back position, while on the other end of the spectrum, the Philadelphia Eagles, Cleveland Browns, Houston Texans, Seattle Seahawks, Miami Dolphins have the most difficult strength of schedules. Now, a couple of thoughts that immediately come to my mind when I look at this. The NFC North has probably the easiest path at the running back position. We're talking about Alexander Mattison, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, Khalil Herbert, Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon. I mean, when you have Minnesota, the Lions, Chicago Bears, and of course Green Bay Packers at number 9, when they're all in the top 9 of this conversation, it is going to be an extremely advantageous season for these running backs. And there really shouldn't be a surprise as to why I have guys like Alexander Mattison and Montgomery as highly ranked as I do, even Aaron Jones in my overall running back rankings. Besides the fact that they're going to be given a very good workload of opportunity, they're also in the most advantageous position based on the fact that they get to play against their own division, twice a year, each team. And the Green Bay Packers, the Detroit Lions, the Minnesota Vikings, the Chicago Bears, they have all proven to be terrible at stopping the run. And though all these defenses have made improvements this offseason, or expected improvements this offseason in terms of stopping the run, it's not going to be an immediate shift. You need to replace the entire defense if you want to improve. And quite frankly, they haven't. There's a lot of, maintained pieces within these defenses that certainly are the primary issue as to why they cannot stop the run. Now, other teams and associated running backs that, kind of jump off screen, the Baltimore Ravens and the Los Angeles Rams. Again, the strength of schedule that is presented on screen is for isolated running back rushing statistics alone. Therefore, when we're talking about guys like J.K. Dobbins and Cam Akers, who really aren't going to catch the ball more than maybe 30 times this upcoming season. If we get lucky, they catch the ball more, that'd be incredible. But considering they're not going to, on a typical basis, get a lot of receiving work based on how their offenses are structured, these are two guys that are heavily going to benefit from the fact that they're associated with a team that wants to run the ball and, of course, can succeed in doing so in advantageous matchups. Additionally, we have the Kansas City Chiefs at number 11, Isaiah Pacheco, who should be the primary back there, finds himself a very advantageous schedule behind an offensive line that overall has a couple of changes to the offensive tackles. The interior of the line is going to still be the same. Therefore, their running should be just as elite as it was last season, of course, with the efforts of Pacheco behind them. Now, before I move on to the topic of talking about isolated spectrums of time, weeks 1 through 7, 8 through 14 in the fantasy playoffs, on the other end of the spectrum, we find that the Philadelphia Eagles, the Cleveland Browns, the Houston Texans, Seattle Seahawks, they have the most difficult strength of schedule. That is Kenneth Walker, Dameon Pierce, Nick Chubb, and of course, DeAndre Swift, I guess Rashad Penny in that conversation. I want you to not really worry about guys like Nick Chubb. These other guys that are in association that may be in a backfield in which they're not getting the full workload of touches, specifically Kenneth Walker, hopefully Dameon Pierce is going to get himself, unimpeded volume of opportunity, and Devin Singletary does not bleed into that. But when we're talking about an elite running back like Nick Chubb, I'm not really worried about him there. As for the other running backs that are splitting touches, that are in offenses that do not have to run the ball with their running backs to find success, therein lies a little bit of the difficulty in approaching them this upcoming season, but we'll go ahead and talk about them at an extended rate as we continue on. So let's talk about weeks 1 through 7 and the strength of schedules as such. Now, immediately we see that, of course, the Seattle Seahawks and Kenneth Walker have the easiest strength of schedule at the running back position. Even though this should make me excited for his potential at the beginning of the year, this also does kind of worry me about Zach Charbonnet immediately jumping in and not only getting himself a handful of touches here and there. If the schedule is relevant enough for him to be utilized and he is effective with his touches, it is going to then at that point establish with the organization, yeah, we can trust Zach Charbonnet for the remainder of the year. And then it becomes a timeshare between those two backs. And that is not what we want. And that is what frightens me immediately out the gate regarding the fact that the Seattle Seahawks have an advantageous strength of schedule. So just putting it out there. But couple other names that popped up off screen. Bijan Robinson and the Atlanta Falcons, the 6th easiest matchup at the running back position behind one of the better offensive lines. Bijan Robinson should be the number 1 back, a 3-down back at that. Takes on Carolina, Green Bay, Detroit, Jacksonville, and Houston. The first 5 games of the season. He should completely torch these defenses. Absolutely without a doubt in my mind. And once he does, he's off to the races. He could be in that top 5 conversation, if not the number 1 running back throughout the first 5 weeks of the season. And then it's over. He has that backfield on lock, and they're just giving him 300 plus touches within the given year. Now, another running back that, of course, kind of pops off screen in terms of their potential, schedule here is Nick Chubb, taking on Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Tennessee, Baltimore, then gets a bye week, then plays San Francisco. Now, you may be thinking, Andrew, that's not a great schedule. I know, it's not a great schedule. They quite literally have 5 playoff games in a row. When you play against Cincinnati, they're a playoff team. Pittsburgh, winning record last year, could have been a playoff team. Tennessee, the top 2 best run-stopping defenses in terms of the league right now. Tennessee, and of course, San Francisco. San Francisco a little bit later on in the schedule, but then you also take on Baltimore, a team that's familiar with you, that wants to stop the run. I mean, we're in a position here where Nick Chubb does not start on great terms to begin the year. Just putting it out there, but nonetheless, still has the ability to redeem himself considering he is an elite level talent and he's behind an incredible offensive line. So regardless of said matchups, I'm still starting him throughout all of those weeks because I know he's capable of producing regardless of the fact that he has a difficult strength of schedule. All right, now use these statistics on screen to the best of your use. Interpret them the way you would like. But we're going to go ahead and move on from weeks 8 through 14, another spectrum of time. Other running backs that continue to jump off the screen are teams from the NFC North. Montgomery, Gibbs. The Detroit Lions take on Las Vegas, have a bye week, and then after the bye, completely tear apart the league as they take on Los Angeles Chargers, Chicago, Green Bay, New Orleans, who used to be good at stopping the run last year, were completely just not themselves. Probably once again will be awful. And then Chicago again. For David Montgomery, not only do you have the easiest matchups you could possibly ask for against Las Vegas, then the Los Angeles Chargers, then Green Bay, but then you get 2 revenge games against the Chicago Bears throughout that span of time. Sounds like an easy path with some revenge opportunity to find the end zone. Additionally, other teams in which their running backs associated with them seem like guys that I would like to have on my roster at this point of the season. Breece Hall and Javonte Williams. At this point, when you get to week 8, we will have the best looking Javonte Williams / Breece Hall that we could possibly ask for in the 2023 season. They will have gotten past the early stage of probably the first month of the season in which they're being used at a kind of scarce pace in order to kind of get them back into the rhythm. And then at this point, from weeks 8 on, they should be fully themselves, or at least be given the full opportunity to lead to potential fantasy success. So this is a good sign here. Of course, Dobbins and Akers, both benefiting from an advantageous strength of schedule, continue to be at the top of this conversation. Either way, again, we see Kenneth Walker now at the very bottom of this list. Going from the best to the worst strength of schedule within an 8-week span is a little tough, but understand that it's going to get difficult when you play against San Francisco and Dallas in a matter of 3 straight weeks. Throughout that span of time, I'm looking to probably move on from Kenneth Walker and probably trade him before I even get to that point, but we'll talk about it as we get into the year. Let's move on to the final conversation here regarding to the last spectrum of time, the fantasy playoffs, weeks 15 through 17. Again, if you are a commissioner in your league, please be sure to go ahead and make sure you are not playing a fantasy championship in week 18. Do your league a favor. Thank you. Now, as I'm sure you have recognized already on screen, the Tennessee Titans maintain the #1 strength of schedule at the running back position for weeks 15 through 17. When you are going to capture a fantasy football championship, if you have Derrick Henry on roster, the question is going to be, are the Tennessee Titans playing meaningful games in December and January? Are they in the playoff hunt? And if they are, Derrick Henry plays against Houston, Seattle, and Houston in the final 3 weeks of the fantasy football season. Since 2019, Derrick Henry has averaged 29.17 half PPR fantasy points per game in the last 6 games he has played against the Houston Texans. In those last 6 games, accumulating 1,104 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns in the last 6 games against Houston. It's going to be more of the same. Derrick Henry will win fantasy championships if he is in a position where he's healthy and this is a team that is competing to make the playoffs. Because if they're not, who's to say that they don't replace him? But if, in fact, you get into a position where he's ready to go and the Tennessee Titans are leading the division in terms of their record and they're going to continue to blow these teams out in order to ensure they make a playoff spot, Derrick Henry is a league-winning running back, to say the very least. Either way, we have teams like the Minnesota Vikings who pop up again. The Cleveland Browns are the opposite end of the conversation now. Denver Broncos still at the top of this conversation. There are teams that continue to shuffle back and forth, but the ones at the very top of this conversation, specifically Tennessee and whoever's going to be the starting Eagles running back by the time we get there, could be of extreme value to our overall fantasy success in terms of capturing a championship. Nonetheless, interpret the statistics as you'd like to. We're going to go ahead, once again, transition, talk about the full schedule weeks 1 through 17 for the 2023 season at the running back position. It is extremely advantageous for the Minnesota Vikings. First and foremost, I know a lot of people have said, Andrew, when Alexander Mattison has played as the starting running back of this organization and the spot starts in which Dalvin Cook missed time over the course of the last 3 seasons, he was up against one of the worst defenses of all time, the Detroit Lions, against incredible matchups, and that's why he succeeded. It's not changing. He's behind the best run blocking, or at least the best graded run blocking offensive line going into the 2023 season. On top of it, this is a successful offense that is going to score points, who are going to move the ball with their arm, of course, with Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson, leading the ship there. But once you have an advantageous strength of schedule on top of it, considering you played Detroit twice, Green Bay twice, Chicago twice, and then, of course, the fact that the rest of their schedule is still advantageous enough to keep Alexander Mattison relevant. If the rumors about Kareem Hunt visiting and potentially signing don't come to fruition, Alexander Mattison has a lot of potential value. Now, when we talk about Denver's backfield, it's going to be a matter of what Javonte Williams we witness. Are we going to witness a running back who just came off an ACL injury? Or are we going to see someone who is absolutely, completely dominated that injury and is a one-of-one running back, similar to an Adrian Peterson, who can come back from such a devastating injury and be relevant? That is going to be difficult to predict based on where I sit here behind this camera. Now, in terms of, Detroit Lions, Chicago Bears, Khalil Herbert, again, it's going to be interesting. Yesterday, he took a screen pass to the house. That isn't something that, we can guarantee to happen every week. But sure, he's going to have an advantageous schedule. So are the, David Montgomery / Jahmyr Gibbs backfield. But in terms of rushing statistics, it's going to be all David Montgomery. Jahmyr Gibbs is not going to get the goal line carries. Please understand that. He may catch the ball 80 times this year, but the goal line carries are not going in his direction, to say the very least. Either way, even though the SOS averages on screen go from 13.31 to 19.72, in some circumstances, the difference between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Carolina Panthers, it's not a huge difference. But when you talk about the number 1 team versus the number 32, there is such a significant difference in terms of average strength of schedule that they're taking on over the course of that 17-week season. It is a pretty big deal. Either way, thank you everybody for watching. Hope you appreciated today's content. If you did, be sure to subscribe, click the like button down below. Greatly helps support the channel. Thank you very much. Of course, the goal of this season is to reach 100,000 subscribers. So be a friend, tell a friend about the channel. Of course, we're trying to win everyone a fantasy football championship. I know it's competitive, but that's the whole point. You want a competitive fantasy league. Otherwise, if you're just crushing everyone, what's the point? Anyway, thank you everybody for watching. Another reminder, if you guys have not yet already, be sure to travel over on to Underdog Fantasy. When you sign up using code Andrew and make that first time deposit minimum of $10, again, you're going to get that first time deposit match. You're going to be able to draft teams and gain experience this offseason. You're going to get my draft guide, the rankings, and of course, weeks 1 through 18 Sunday morning rankings, half PPR, full PPR, flex, all of it in order to help you win a fantasy football championship. Until tomorrow, thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you guys. Peace.